You think like one of us, the uniformed man said. Stop with this nonsense about going to Warsaw. Join us, Shia. You can do far more good here. We have a package to deliver in Warsaw, Esther said. If it's true that the Germans will return to destroy the ghetto, then the people here will need this package. A package? Reuben stopped walking to look at both of us. Almost a year ago, the Germans lined up 52 members of the resistance and shot them in public, hoping that would stop the uprising. Moretti vowed to fight harder. I don't care what package you have. It won't stop the Germans when they return this time. Esther glanced at me, but said nothing more. I pushed past Reuben to follow the others, saying, We're not going here to stop the Germans. We're going because we belong there. The partisan camp was a half-kilometer off the road, built in a ravine that gave it cover from any casual sightings. In the summer and autumn months, their canvas tents and motorbikes would be harder to find, but I wished they had better ways to hide the dark colors against the snow. Spring would be coming soon. If the partisans lasted that long, they might be able to continue hiding here for some time. Esther and I were taken into a tent with handmade wooden chairs settled around some large rocks that emanated a heat I longed to wrap my frozen body around. Instead, I scooted my chair as close as possible to a larger rock and held my hand even closer, letting them thaw. Reuben explained his technique. The rocks had been warmed in a fire earlier tonight and would hold their heat for several hours. On top of them was a steaming coffee pot, and cups were poured for everyone who followed us in. We still had our bags with us, and we set them between our chairs. Reuben took a seat to my right. We went back to our old safe house after the cafe, he said. You must have. I thought others would come there too, but no one did. Most of the people who weren't arrested near the cafe collected at Dolek's bunker. His eyes flickered with sadness. We were betrayed that night, Shia. 2 Akiva members told the Gestapo where Dolek would be. Everyone there was killed or arrested, including the 2 who betrayed us, hoping to gain favors from the Nazis. The only favor those traitors received was a one-way trip on the trains. You survived. I'd left the bunker an hour earlier, looking for you. But when I heard about the arrest, I got scared and left Krakow. His eyes softened. I wanted to go to our safe house, but I thought if the Gestapo knew about the bunker, they probably knew about the safe house too. I shrugged away any need for him to apologize and only asked, What about Hanusa and Jacob, the other 2 members of our cell? Jacob was killed in some crossfire at the cafe, and Hanusa was arrested. I don't know if she's still alive. I closed my eyes and vowed not to remember them that way, only to think of my friends as they had been, courageous and strong, back when we raided the warehouses and trains, when we believed anything was possible if we just dared enough. It was odd to consider that those were the good memories, but they were. What's in your bag? Reuben asked. I dragged mine closer to me, almost subconsciously. Supplies for Warsaw. Reuben hesitated a moment, then gestured at Esther's wrist. We have a doctor here. He can look at that. Come with me, a woman said. A woman who had been sitting near us stood and smiled down at Esther. I'll take you to him. Reuben whispered to Esther that it was okay, and she followed the woman out. Now he turned his chair to face me, and everyone else around us seemed to melt into the background. I looked into his eyes and felt myself genuinely smile. One of the few times I'd done that in weeks. I'd missed Reuben's counsel, his ability to plan and to console. I'd missed Reuben. He said, It's better that we talk without Esther. She seems more fragile than before. She's not. I was wrong about her. Still, now we'd get to more serious business. What do we need to talk about? Warsaw. Last fall, the Nazis sent out 300,000 people from there to the death camps. The Allies did nothing then. They won't come now. Then the people of Poland, they won't help either. 70,000 Jews remain in Warsaw. Zob posted warnings inside the ghetto not to willingly get on the train, not to believe the lies. The Nazi response was to post warnings outside the ghetto, telling the Poles that anyone caught hiding a Jew or helping them in even the smallest way would be put to death. The people inside the ghettos are entirely on their own. I straightened my back. Then it's even more important for me to go, because they have no other help. Zob has no chance of winning. It's not about winning. It's about fighting, about proving to the world. At some point, it has to be about winning, about surviving. Dolek talked about 3 lines of history. Well, someone must be around to write those lines. Maybe they could be, if the partisans would help. We are, but it's not enough. It's never enough. You must understand, Warsaw has become a pressure cooker, and it's about to burst. Moretti wants a fight, and as soon as the Germans put their first toe inside the ghetto, he'll get it. Reuben took my hand and leaned in. You're a good courier, Chaya, and have more courage than most people I've ever known. But none of that will save you in Warsaw. I bit my lip and took my final sip of coffee. When my brother and sister disappeared, you supported me. When I promised to honor them with my life, you supported me again. Can't you support me now? A light in his eye dimmed. I felt the same sadness, but my resolve remained. After a heavy pause, he nodded, then said, Try to rest. When it's safe to move, we'll get you as close to Warsaw as we can. I didn't know exactly how he intended to do that, but I liked the idea of someone else being in charge, and once I was offered a bedroll near the warm rocks, I wrapped the blanket tightly around me and quickly fell into a deep sleep. I didn't dream this time, or if I did, I remembered nothing but dark before my eyes. And I hoped that wasn't a sign of my future, because everything I knew about Warsaw warned me that what was coming would be worse than any nightmare. Chapter 31, February 1st, 1943, Road to Warsaw. We slept late the next morning, but I was finally warm, comfortable, and felt reasonably safe. I didn't even pretend to care about what time it was. The partisans were preparing a midday meal when I ducked out of my tent. Esther had been kept in a nearby medical tent for evaluation, but she was already up and helping with the food. Her face brightened when she saw me, and she showed off her newly wrapped wrist. Breakfast was simple, a thick slice of bread and a little dried meat and hot coffee, but it tasted like a feast to me. Life as a partisan wasn't easy, but at least they had a chance to live free out here, beyond the ghetto walls. After we'd eaten, our bags were returned to us, but with one difference. We loaded your gun and packed you some extra ammunition, Reuben told me. If you're going to Warsaw, you'll need it. I'll use it well, I replied. I promise I fully intend to keep. The partisans had a sidecar motorcycle, which they offered to take us in to Warsaw. Esther chose the sidecar while I rode behind Reuben. The roads were good, and the weather looked promising. Assuming we weren't forced to detour around any Nazi patrols, we should reach Warsaw in little over an hour. I'll get you into the city, Reuben said, but not into the ghetto. I hope you understand. I understood why the partisans discouraged us from joining a fight that was sure to fail. But if they joined the fight too, it might offer enough of a boost for the ghetto fighters to succeed. Why couldn't they understand that? Due to its central placement in Europe, Warsaw had been erased from the map many times over in its history, each time returning stronger and more beautiful than before. It boasted the nickname Paris of the North, and had been my favorite place to go as a child. I would accompany Papa when he had to travel there to get supplies for his shoe repair shop. I particularly loved walking the gardens near the Saxon Palace, or touring the art museum, or sneaking away with my mother for a bit of shopping. On our last trip together before the war, Warsaw was a bustling, vibrant city of over 1 million citizens, a third of them Jews. Warsaw would be a very different place now. Our ride into the city was remarkably easy, especially considering all the trouble we'd had since leaving Krakow. Still, once we entered the city limits, a lump formed in my throat. Suddenly, Esther had my mission, and my mission felt far too real. The city looked as if it was on the brink of being erased from the map yet again. We passed whole buildings that had been leveled to the ground during the Blitzkrieg. Some of the back streets still impassable with debris. Polish citizens walked with their eyes down, avoiding the Nazi soldiers who roamed nearly every corner. Esther saw them too and ducked so low into the sidecar that unless someone looked down on us from above, they probably wouldn't notice she was even there. She still hadn't said much about what she'd endured the other night, but I suspected it was worse than what she had described. Fear lingered on her face with every change of expression. Not her usual dread of the unknown, but the terror that came with knowing how far the Nazis would go to get what they wanted. Reuben turned onto a quiet street and offered me a grim smile. "Is there any way I can persuade you to return with me to the forest?" I wished we could, truly. It seemed cruel to discover Reuben was still alive, only to have to say goodbye already. But I climbed off the back of his motorbike and gave him a hug. "I'm afraid not. We have to see our mission through to the end." He nodded to Esther, who was stepping onto the street. "You say you have a package to deliver to the ghetto. What is it? What could be so valuable that you have risked all of this to be here?" Before she could answer, if she would have, I cut off his question with a warm "Thank you." If it wasn't my business to ask about the package, it certainly wasn't his. And he seemed to understand. He gave my hand a squeeze, though this time there was money in his palm. "It's all I have," he said. "Use it well." "Thank you," I whispered. "We will." Reuben frowned at me, and I felt his heart tug at mine, begging me to reconsider. I gave him one last hug, though it had to be brief. It couldn't look as permanent as it was. Nor did I look back when he drove off. I couldn't, but not because it raised suspicion. My reasons for avoiding a last look at him were far more personal. How do we get into the ghetto itself? I needed a conversation again as a distraction. "We'll find a way." Esther faced steadfastly forward as we walked. She was different from the girl I first met last fall. Somewhere amid her fears, a new confidence had emerged, a determination to finish what the Nazis had started. We should get as much as we can bring in," I said. "Once we're in, that's probably our last stop. Ever." She looked over at me and nodded, a gesture given with finality, because there was nothing more to say. We both knew what we were walking into.